Well, it's another sad day as Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic reported today that Blues defenseman Philip Broberg sustained an injury during the team's practice. We're waiting to hear the full extent of the injury itself. News should come a little bit later. But what would it mean for the Blues if Broberg does miss additional time due to this injury? In other news, we saw a ton of lineup changes in the Blues' recent game against the Vegas Golden Knights. So, what does it mean for the team if players like Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich and Justin Faulk aren't playing where we expected them to? We'll talk about all that and more today on Note News. Hello, hello. Welcome into another episode of Note News. It's John and Alec with you as always. If you are new to Note News, we're a St. Louis Blues podcast. We go live twice a week to talk all things St. Louis Blues, rumors, the latest news, game breakdowns, players, draft prep, prospects, all kinds of stuff. So you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you like audio. We're also on YouTube as well. We live stream on YouTube, so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd appreciate that. That helps us out a whole lot. You can like this video and other videos as they come out. You can also give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod, where we post a lot of other cool stuff, graphics, memes, videos, all kinds of fun stuff. So check us out there, and that's where you can tune in for updates and news and find out when we're going live. So be sure to follow us on all those platforms. You can see on the side of the screen over there. Well, Alec, Broberg might be missing some additional time. This is a bummer for sure. JR reported that he went down in practice today. It's January 22nd as we record this. He also said that Broberg had to be helped off of the ice, and he wasn't putting any weight on his right leg, I believe is what he said. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the same leg that he injured against Toronto earlier in the season, way back in, gosh, was that November?
Yeah.
That happened, I believe. Yeah, so this could be pretty bad. According to Jim Montgomery, Broberg will be evaluated. More information on his injury should be available tomorrow. But this is tough. Like, this is the time of the year and the point in the season where they really, like, every game matters. I mean, every game matters in a season regardless. But, like, at this point, it's kind of the way you play has, I guess, more drastic impacts on your sort of playoff hopes and your playoff chase if you're the Blues right now. So this is, like I said, bad news if it's going to be a significant injury, and we don't know the full extent yet. But if Broberg misses time, this could be tough. What does it mean for the Blues team and their performance on the ice? What does it mean for their lineup construction? We'll talk about that here today. But just big question conceptually to start us off here. What does this mean for the Blues? I'm thinking about their offensive production, their defense, which has been solid as of late, their special teams. What's your take on this potential Broberg injury if he misses time? What does it mean for this Blues team?
I will say Lou Korek's tweet is a little bit more positive.
Okay.
He said, Broberg just took a spill in a drill and hobbled off, putting little weight on right leg.
Okay.
So it looks bad, but I guess severity is probably, it looks like a moderate to potentially severe injury.
Yeah.
I don't want to entirely speculate if it is severe. I mean, if it's severe, then he's shut down for probably up to the end of the season. Maybe he'll play another month at most. But I think that if that happens, then obviously it's terrible. But the answers will be quick versus if it's a moderate injury. I think there's a little bit more room for discussion. So that's mostly what I'm taking on here.
Yeah.
But I think this is a really the Blues defense as of late has really been impressive and not necessarily carrying the team, but playing well enough to hold their own. And Philip Broberg was a big part of that. So losing an important player who was taking important minutes is, a big deal. That being said, it isn't quite as catastrophic. And I know we all love Broberg now that he's become this really exciting young defenseman. Hearing those words in discussion of a Blues player is something I think we never thought we'd see again after the past couple seasons. But
Yeah.
it might feel a lot worse. I do think Broberg's play recently has really tailed off, especially offensively. He still seems pretty comfortable within the system, but the production really was not there.
Yeah.
So there was a stagnation to his game that probably would have warranted more individual coaching effort anyways. So if there is a bright side, that this will get him a chance to sort of look more at the mental side of things, which I think is where his development should probably come, because he's been in the right positions, at least in my viewing. I feel like he's been in the right positions. He's still been good defensively, and that's sort of the biggest thing, that I feel like he's doing everything right.
Yeah.
Or he's not doing things in a way that hurts the team.
Sure.
But obviously the production hasn't been there, so there's something wrong. I don't think that is necessarily going to get solved by him skating around firing pucks at the net. Now, it would help if he were playing, but if there is a spin, I think, for Broberg's development, that this could actually potentially, hopefully, return him to form. However, the fact that this was sort of a practice injury is also a little bit disheartening for Broberg, because I really think, well, mostly just that there have been two major injuries of his now, or two moderate injuries in one season. This isn't a guy who had a ton of injury history before, but I don't know. It's something to monitor, and maybe it's just this season he got unlucky. So I'll end it there. And then your question on what does this mean for the team? I think this is really, it really honestly puts Jim Montgomery in a tough spot, because I don't know what to do at this point. Falk, we just seen get demoted down
Yeah.
onto the third pairing, because he's just been terrible. Like, he's been really truly terrible this season. And there's really no two ways about that. I mean, I think likely what they'll do is probably keep Falk down, or what I would do is keep Falk down on the third pair, at least for a little bit, to see if he can get it back. But I mean, defensively, he's been unplayable, and offensively hasn't been offsetting his poor defense enough. So what I would think would happen is that you'll play Suter on the second pair, and then Tucker, Kessel, Perunovic. Probably Tucker, as of right now, if I had to guess, is going to get a chance on second pair minutes. But that's a big step for still a young player. So we're really going to need someone to step up. I think that the defensive unit, while Broberg wasn't necessarily like a key contributor to the overall team success by his own production, like he was at the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though his production tailed off, he was still such a valuable puzzle piece in slotting into the lineup, because of how easy it made everyone else's slotting and arrangement in
Yeah.
the positioning. And so Broberg being out just means that someone is going to have to step up. This team has been tested time and time and time again this season, and this is going to be another test. Like, for a playoff team that's already, or excuse me, for a team looking at the playoffs that is already fighting an uphill battle to get there, a playoff hopeful team is what I meant to say, who's already fighting an uphill battle to get there, to have this is just another really big test. And like, it'll be so exciting if we can get some answers of if Tucker can hold his own on that second pair. But yeah, this is going to test the team. I don't think there's really any positive spin for the team as a whole, even if Broberg could maybe learn something from this. Offensively, I don't know that it affects a ton, if I'm being totally honest. Like I said, Broberg was just not. I don't think he had a point since like several games.
Yeah.
I should have that in front of me, but I don't. But yeah, it looks tough any way you shake it. Even though offensively he didn't really help out. Again, he's still part of that lineup. He was part of special teams. So I think the biggest hit is going to come to the defense, though.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. Just to sort of characterize his production a little bit so far, you're right. He was off to that like scorching hot start, and we were like, "Hold up, do we have some lightning in a bottle here?" And he did cool off after coming back from that injury, like you said. And I think for that reason, due to because he's cooled off offensively since coming back. I think people are a little bit undervaluing him and underestimating the player that he is as a whole package. Yes, the offensive production has kind of gone silent, like you were saying. He did have a point against Vegas. He had an assist. So, um,
Okay, so he
but
broke his streak.
he broke his streak. But before that, he hadn't had a point since the Winter Classic against the Chicago Blackhawks. So it had definitely been a while, like you said. But I think people are undervaluing the player that Philip Broberg is. He has been one of the best players on this team. When you look at you know when you look at the whole gamut of player contribution, offense and defense. One breakdown that I really like is Dom over at the Athletic. His model, his net rating model, accounts for offensive rating and defensive rating. And while Broberg's offensive rating isn't anything to write home about, he is like vastly performing his preseason expectations when it comes to defense. He has been so valuable in so many ways. Um, he's blocking a lot of shots. He's breaking up a lot of chances, and this is something that we broke down on one of our defensive oriented episodes not too long ago. Just sort of what has been the reason for this like defensive resurgence from the Blues, um, and I sort of broke down. I saw a lot of plays being broken up and a more dynamic offense, and Broberg like is a big part of that. He was sort of leading that effort and setting that example before the whole team defensive dynamic shifted that way. Um, back before his first injury, like you look at how he uses his body and his stick to defend, and he is like a tough player for any forward to play against. He just gets in your face and interferes with whatever you're trying to do. Um, Looking at one metric that I really like to use to sort of analyze defensive production is high danger chances and goals allowed. Um, Broberg has played a lot of minutes. He's played um, let's see, quick math, the fourth most minutes on the Blues so far. And when he's on the ice, they've only had 86 high danger chances against in 614 minutes. Um, but only four of those have become goals. Like only four of those chances have turned into goals. And I think there's a lot of things that go into that. His on ice save percentage is pretty good. Like when he's on the ice, goalies tend to perform a little better. But I think he's a big part of that. He's an effective defenseman. He's a smart defenseman, and really the entire package of his game is super valuable. He's being paid, what is it, like 4.6 million, I believe, this year. We thought that was like way overpaying him, and we knew that, and we were fine with that, right? Like we were like, yes, he's overpaid, but it's fine. Like we got this guy. Well, he's playing like a $6 million player this season. I think that number is a little bit inflated by, again, his hot start that he got off to offensively, but still, look at his defensive rating. He is fantastic at 5-on-5, at limiting chances, breaking up chances, and he's been really effective for the Blues. And this will definitely be tough for them to recover from if he does miss significant time. We'll talk about this a lot, and we have already in recent episodes, but we'll just continue to because that's the nature of a wild card race. Um, the next few games are pretty tough. They've got Vegas tomorrow night on the 23rd, Dallas on the 25th, Vancouver on the 27th, and Colorado on the 31st. That's four in a row, pretty tough opponents. One of whom you're in the wild card race with, and you'd love to sort of leapfrog. And missing a player that's as effective as Broberg and who takes as many minutes as Broberg, it's going to be a big hit. So definitely tough. What I want to do now is talk a little bit about how this affects the lineup, right? You sort of got into it a little bit when you were just breaking it down, but he's been playing on the second pair, almost every night. He was elevated to the top pair for a little while before Cam Fowler was acquired. He's been bumped back down to the second pair, which is, I think we agree, pretty much where he belongs at this point, at least for his offensive production. I think he belongs down there. Um, but with him gone, who will take over his spot, right? How will this affect the shuffle of the roster? As you said, Falk was demoted. We're going to talk about that later on in the episode, sort of the lineup shuffles that we saw from the Blues last game. But Falk was demoted last time. As you said, he hasn't been great. Suter was promoted in that game to play alongside Broberg. Um, I personally think, I mean, I want to get your thoughts here. Like, what do you think we'll see with these defensive pairs? Because I could see it going, one of two ways. Either they just pair Suter and Falk together and hope to have like a solid, I guess, veteran pair, and then that third pair is sort of more what we saw early season, a Tucker and a Perunovich, or something like that. Or do you think we'll see them split those veterans and the younger players up and sort of make those two pairs more or less, similar when it comes to who's playing on them?
Well, what I would like to happen is for Falk to stay on the third pair and, like you said, split up the veterans and young guys. Really, mostly because I just think it's such a liability to have Justin Faulk playing like 17, 18 minutes a night. I mean, his 5-on-5 stats, really all strengths are poor, but his 5-on-5 stats are like among the worst in the league defensively. And I just like having that on the second pair is really asking for trouble, if you ask me, and that's sort of been what's happening. That's why he earned his demotion. Is kind of a weird sound to it, but regardless, yeah, I mean, I think you can't play Falk. Let's see. So he has been on ice for a goal allowed in 4 of the last 6 games. If I extend that back one game, he had a -3 rating in a game where he's tallied 2 points. So he has been allowing a lot of goals. That was also, he was playing first pair minutes against Minnesota. That was against Minnesota. So in his last 7 games, he has a -7 rating despite putting up 4 points. That's quite poor. I just don't think you can have that on the second pair right now if you are actually being honest and trying to win as a team. That being said, I don't know if they're ready to elevate a guy like Tucker, because I think he would be the logical second pair with Suter.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. I kind of just feel like if the Blues and Jim Montgomery are going to act as they have, for however long it's been now. Now, to be fair, Jim Montgomery was never in charge, so I don't know this for sure.
Yeah.
But I know, like, probably Drew Bannister, and probably Berube would have put Falk back on the second pair. So if Monty really wants to shake things up and keep them shaken up despite this really unlucky injury, then Falk will stay on the third pair, and it's going to be Tucker. And that's, I think, what helps the team, because then we get more information about Tucker. And Tucker is a guy who has incrementally gotten more playing time over the years. He is 24 years old, about to be 25, so right in that aging curve to where this is his make or break the NHL time. The last 2 seasons, he played exactly 26 games in both seasons, so a little bit more than a cup of coffee, but nothing more than third pair minutes anyways, and was, I don't know, okay at best. This season, he has already hit his career high in points at 4 in less games, and is looking pretty good on ice, honestly.
For sure.
Like, this is the time you would want to test Tucker anyways. I think he's shown everything that he can on the third pair, and it just feels like such a better move to at least try Tucker, because we know what we're getting with Falk. At the very least, you don't know what Tucker is going to look like on the second pair, so it's something new, and I think there's a lot of good reason to think that it won't be as bad as Justin Faulk had shown. So yeah, I think it really should be Tucker, but I just I don't know. I've seen this team do this before.
Yeah, seen this film before. Um, didn't like the ending for all those Taylor Swift fans out there. Yeah, like as solid as Broberg has been defensively, Justin Faulk has been that like as bad defensively. He also has been a black hole offensively, not really generating a ton. He saw a lot of power play minutes, especially earlier on in the season, and he's someone like whereas Broberg is outplaying his contract, Falk is the opposite. He is worth way less than what he's being paid, and it was almost like addition by subtraction, seeing him play, in a lower profile role, playing fewer minutes, like probably better for the team.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, Tyler Tucker, since he came up, has been fantastic. Like you look at his all around production, his game score that he's accumulated um, since he has come up. He's accrued a higher game score than Ryan Suter has had all season. Included, like it's a cumulative stat, right? It can fluctuate, it can go up and down. So even Suter at his highest, when early in the season we were like, this guy is fantastic, and he is sort of resurrecting this defense in a way, or at least supporting it, like holding it up um, while it's not in great shape. Um, as good as Suter had been earlier in the season, Tucker has been better than that all season, or that better than better in his time so far than Suter has been all season. So he's really just come up and had an immediate impact in a lot of different ways. So you were saying Suter and Tucker on that second pair is what you would hope to see. Um,
Yes.
I agree in principle, but I mean, who plays on the third pair with Falk? Is it Perunovic in that case? Because I think if it is, that would maybe help him produce a little bit more offensively. Like Perunovic has been okay offensively, but defensively that could be trouble. So I mean, what do you think about like what do you think about who would slot in with Falk? How that pairing would produce? Um, do you split up those more effective defensemen and Tucker and Suter to try and sort of level out both pairs? Like what are your thoughts on all that?
I think at some point, especially for a team that knows that they're not, Stanley Cup contenders, there's going to be a hole on the roster. And I think your third defensive pair is an okay place to have a hole on the roster, is how I see that sort of, I don't know, dilemma isn't the right word, but,
Yeah,
um, Falcon Perunovic would then be the third pair unless they call back up Kessel, which in my head, I don't think Falk is getting cut from the lineup, so it's going to be either Falk and Perunovic or Falk and Kessel, and Perunovic is on the roster right now, which is why I say so. But regardless, it doesn't really make like a world of difference to me. If the third pair guys don't have the most optimized complementary skill sets. And I think that also the lesson minutes also sort of lessens their potential negatives
yeah,
on the team.
right.
I don't really know if Perunovic, like, it seems like Perunovic really plays with the forwards more than his D pair.
Yeah,
So I don't really know that like him pairing him up with Falk would really help his development in any way.
hmm
Um, and Kessel, I just don't know what to make of Matt Kessel. He just it looks like a year or two out to me.
yeah.
Um, so like, would it be bad defensively? Yeah, absolutely. But at some point, I think there's a limit. Is how I see it.
Yeah, I think I think that's fair. Like the point of if there's going to be a hole, the third D pair is a fine place for that. I think yeah, I think you're probably right. I will say when Justin Falk and Scott Perunovic have played together this season, it's only 106 minutes together, but like they've looked okay. Um, Offensively, that is, they have like a 61 expected goal share, 61%, and their Corsi percent is 56, just about. Um, so I mean, not terrible offensively. The question is, would that be a bad defensive pair? Um, I personally, I don't know. I could see it either way, but the way I'm leaning now is I might prefer to see Suter and Falk play together, and Tucker and Perunovic play together. Like Suter and Tucker being the more effective, um, the more effective defensemen of the four that we have. I think I would honestly prefer to split them up, in the same way that you see talent. Not that these are the same caliber of player by any means, but like the same way that Thomas and Kyrou are split up a little bit to sort of try and maximize the offensive production you get from those players by utilizing them at different times. I think I'd probably honestly prefer to see Tucker and Suter utilized that way, splitting them up a little bit. Um, but I mean, we can agree to disagree on that one. I don't think there's a great solution either way, if we're being honest. But I think, and honestly, we're splitting hairs here a little bit. Like I don't think it would be a huge difference one way or another. But um, really, what I'm hoping to see ultimately from Jim Montgomery is that if something isn't working, um, he'll be relatively quick to try and adjust something. Because I think they're at the point where it's like they can't really afford to give an extended look to your second defensive pair if it's not working. And so I'm kind of hoping if it is right, Suter and Tucker, and that's not working, or if the third pair is that bad or something, I'm kind of hoping he'll be willing to, you know, fiddle the knobs a little bit and kind of try something else, because they're at the point where they kind of need to be effective up and down the lineup if they really want to make the playoffs, which I'm sure that they do. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
tough loss for the Blues. Anything else you want to add on the Broberg injury before we talk about some of these pretty interesting lineup shuffles?
Yeah, it's just really tough. And as I said before, this team has just been so battered and challenged this season. So it'll be really interesting to see how they fight back from it. But man, it feels like there's only so much you can take. But regardless,
Yeah, yeah, it is, and that's something that you sort of brought up earlier, pre-episode. Just so many so many hills and valleys to this season. It feels like it's really been a roller coaster, um, especially emotionally for me, man. Like Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway have like quickly become some of my favorite Blues players, and seeing Broberg go down again, is tough. Again, we don't know how much time he'll miss yet. That news is still to come. He's being evaluated, I believe. I mean, he should be being evaluated
they
today,
said
and
tomorrow they'll make a
yeah, and news will come tomorrow.
statement.
Yeah, so um, if it's something minor, they should be fine. Hopefully, they can just stay afloat through this tough stretch through the end of January. But if he does end up missing significant time, it could be an issue. And I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if he is out for an extended period, could we see the Blues, you know, take another look at the trade market and maybe acquiring another defenseman? I don't know, but maybe they'll listen to you and go get like Noah Dobson, right? Um, which would be cool. That would be cool, man.
It would help
Yeah,
the team. Yeah.
it would certainly help the team. But yeah, my Swedish prince Philip Broberg out with an injury probably for at least a little. So we'll see how bad it is soon, but it is tough news. Let's pivot now to talk about something that's pretty interesting that we saw, in this last game against the Vegas Golden Knights. So on January 21st, um, the Blues lineup looked a lot different. So Monty made some pretty big changes to the starting lineup, that forward line of Holloway, Shin, and Kyrou was elevated to the top line role. Saad, Thomas, and Neighbors played on the second line. Buchnevich all the way down on the third line with, I believe, Oscar Sundquist and Alexei Toropchenko. What? Suter again on the second pair and Faulk to the third, which we talked about a little bit already. But, I mean, what's going on here? Like, what do you see as, first of all, why did Montgomery make these changes? Is it simply like a matter of that Holloway, Shin, Kyrou line being so effective that he wants to elevate it? Is it a matter of certain players being disappointing? Does he want to send a message after the Utah game, which, let's be honest, was rough? What are your thoughts? What's your take on what Monty is trying to do by shuffling the lineup like this?
I think it's either sending a message or like truly he's just trying to shake things up to fire this team up because he recognizes that there's been a stagnation. I think this, not being able to win 3 in a row thing is just so almost unexplainable. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's either sending a message or just like trying to shake things up to get something working. But I don't think it's entirely just like a panic move. I think there's actually a lot of merit to what he did. And I don't know how to frame this in a way that doesn't sound like me just like praising everything Jim Montgomery does, which don't get me wrong, I want to, but also I want to be honest and hold him accountable if I don't agree with his decision. I think that decision was really wise, but how do I say that in an intelligent way? Well, I guess we're going to find out together. Like elevating the second line. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather. I keep pausing. Elevating the second line to the first to playing on the first line.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been the best Blues forward line all season. End of story. Like,
not only that, let me just throw in. Not only that, we talked about it a little bit last episode. They have been one of the best forward lines in the league.
Yeah, true.
On both sides of the puck, they are producing offensively like crazy, and they are like locked down defensively. But yeah, just wanted to throw that in there.
The only holdup I might have on the second line becoming the first line now is if Braden Shen can handle 1C minutes, just at his age, at his at the level of play that he's had. But I mean, the guy is hot. Like, you can't disagree. I mean, that goal against Vegas, just like his first goal, not a shootout goal. You know, he just lets it rip from the dot. Like, when you're hot, you're hot. You know, it finds a way, I guess. Good for him, though. And so I like that he's getting more opportunities to score goals. I do think I would look into potentially if/when, because I think his play probably will regress some because he's just so scorching hot right now.
Yeah.
Is switching Thomas and Shen. I think is a really exciting prospect. But then again, like, this is, like you said, this is one of the best lines in the NHL. So do you really want to mess with it? I don't know. I think it does get a little tricky. So I think mostly that's why I say it's like sending a message or just shaking things up. But I mean, like you said, they've been our best producing line. Why should that not be our first line? Thomas, we all know his skill and his ability, but he has had, again, by his standards, which is still a very productive player, a rough patch here. And so, and then, Buchnevich being demoted to the third line is just, he hasn't been producing at all. Like, offensively, been kind of stonewalled and not really able to make a serious impact. You know, he'll get some secondary assists and put up some points, but he hasn't been the goal scorer that we expect from Pavel Buchnevich. And I feel like this year defensively, I think he's still been pretty good. Matt in the chat says he has far from the Selke hopeful he was a couple years ago. I still think he's been good defensively, but you're right. He's been slumping and his defense has taken a hit for sure. So I think all of it is whether intentional or not, is sending a message to these players that it isn't good enough. And then also, yeah, Falk on the big contract, but on the third pair.
Yep.
Suter playing for incentive bonuses and elevated to the second pair.
Yep.
And like all of this, the reason that I say it isn't like an entirely desperate move is because all of it is like actually merit based here. Like Justin Falk has been the worst defenseman on this team who's getting regular minutes. Pavel Buchnevich has not been a first line winger. Holloway, Shen, and Kyrou is the best line that we have right now. Like these are all just objective truths. These aren't things that they're going behind each other's back saying like on in media reports or in rumors or whatever. You and I watching the Cardinals just don't know how to handle themselves the past couple of years. This isn't that. This is
Yeah.
very different from that. And I kind of want to see him stick with it for some time, for probably like a week of play. I don't think this, unless it, obviously, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I feel like this will not be the final solution to the season, but something's got to give. Either the players have to start producing, or at some point, a coach has to do his job. And I think it was just time for Monty to step in, and good on him for, excuse me, I'm sorry. Obviously, he has the job security in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Good on him for not being afraid to make a tough call here. I think that's, uplifting for the future of this team when a tough call needs to get made in a real cup race. But for now, I think it's a shakeup that was needed.
Sure. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I believe before that game against Vegas, Montgomery sort of had a quote where he was just talking about that sort of like team identity of like hardworking, I guess, blue collar hockey, right? He was talking about that a little bit, like trying to get that attitude out of every forward line on the ice. And he also said something to the effect of shuffling the lineup like this can spark the team. And so I think really that's what he's trying to do, just sort of like you said there. But I mean, even if that Holloway Shin Kyrou line is just like on a hot streak, I think it's commendable to try and take advantage of that while it's happening. Like why not let that? Why not try to ride that streak as long as you can, in as many minutes as you can get out of them, right? And I think that's commendable by him. I mean, part of the thing that I've liked about Montgomery is he's like willing to shuffle things up, but it's like in a weird way that doesn't affect consistency, if that makes sense. Like one of the things with Drew Bannister is there were so many pieces moving in and out and in and out. I like the idea of switching around the order of the lines like this because I think you can preserve that line chemistry without breaking. You can preserve that line chemistry by keeping those players together while still sort of altering the overall dynamic of the team. And I think that's fantastic. So, I mean, really, I think he's trying to show the rest of the forward lines is this line of Holloway, Shin, and Kyrou. This is how you play hockey. This is the style of hockey we want to play. This is what you all should be doing, what you all should be striving to do. And really, that's sort of the take that I had. I do also think that game against Utah was bad, dude. Like it was bad. It honestly just looked like the Blues didn't want it at times. And I'm even talking about players like Robert Thomas, who love him to death. And I'm not saying he is like he has a poor work ethic or anything like that. But he had a couple sloppy plays in that game defensively. And I know all these players like they want it. They want to get to 3 wins in a row, which is crazy that we're still talking about that being another barrier to break through. I'm not doubting that they want it. I guess, I don't know, like something's off with the approach. Something's off with the mentality when they come into those situations. When they come into a like high pressure, high profile game, they've been unable to put something together. And if it's one thing to try and make the playoffs. I'm not. I think they're capable of making the playoffs. I don't think they're, as they're playing right now, capable of advancing in the playoffs. And having, this approach where they come into a big game and perform poorly like every time, that's not going to work if you want to make the playoffs. That's not going to work if you want to do well in the playoffs. And so something's got to give. And I think Monty is trying to send a message in that way. Um, so yeah, I think I agree with you there. My next question has to do with like just basically like how long do you think these changes will remain in effect? Like um, how long do you think this forward line will be playing as the top line? How long will Robert Thomas be playing in? I mean not like a super demoted role because he's still playing in that 2C spot, but like how long do we think Buchnevich will be playing on the third line, for example? Like that's a big one
Yeah.
as well. So what are your thoughts there?
Buchnevich is so, I think, central to all this, but also like I don't really know what the answer is
Yeah,
because he's been struggling for a while. He's still been kind of producing, but I feel like I want to say with Buchnevich, it'll once he gets on a hot streak, he'll be back on the second line with Robert Thomas. But it's not a guarantee that he's going to get on a hot streak. So I don't know. I think
right.
honestly, I would say at this point, it might depend on the other second line players on whether or not Buchnevich earns a spot. Jake Neighbors is sort of leveled out to I think where about we expected and we're okay with him being. At least
Yeah,
I would say. I don't know if you disagree with that. Um,
I was hoping for a little more honestly out of Neighbors this year,
okay.
but yeah,
Well,
the
he's been scoring some goals recently. Is
yeah,
mostly
yeah,
what leads me to say that.
yeah. I think really my thing with Neighbors is just like we talked about it a little bit on back on Sunday, but like I expected more out of him. He's not really super productive this season, but he is still really young, and so like I'm sort of reserving judgment as to the player that he will be um, until he kind of I guess concludes his development essentially because I think players have started to figure him out, and it's tougher to play against. Um, it's tougher to play against your opponent when they are more familiar with your game and have strategized to try and stop you essentially. So I think he is struggling a little bit um, due to that, but yeah, still I was hoping for just maybe a little bit more. But like you said, he's been scoring lately, and maybe he'll
Mm-hmm.
sort of kick it into a higher gear to close out the season. But yeah,
He's third in the team right now in goals, but
mhm,
that is a little bit with an asterisk because there are three players tied for 11th, Pavel Buchnevich being one of them. So I guess statistically, Neighbors 24 points, Buchnevich 30, Neighbors 13 goals, Buchnevich 11. So offensively, they are comparable.
right,
But if I'm being honest, like totally on vibes here. Who do I trust to score a goal right now? Jake Neighbors or Pavel Buchnevich? I'm taking Jake Neighbors. I mean, and it looks
mm,
like so is Montgomery. His Neighbors was, I think, the second shooter in that Vegas shootout where he ended up scoring. So I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a wash, but I think Buchnevich is competing for the second line at this point. I think he's pretty much set on the middle six for the rest of the season, though.
yeah,
I wouldn't expect him to be demoted to the fourth line. I think that would be way too extreme. There's just not enough offensive, like, even if he, I mean, I don't want to say even if he doesn't score a point the rest of the season because that's super hyperbolic. But the fourth line talent is not worse than or is not better than Pavel Buchnevich in I think any scenario.
yeah,
Anyways, um, so yeah, I think Buchnevich probably is fighting for second line minutes and is going to be around the middle six for the rest of the season. And you hope that he can earn a spot in the top line next year. But with how Jordan Kyrou and Dylan Holloway have been progressing this year, I don't know. Buchnevich might be done on the first line, and maybe that's a good thing for him. He's certainly getting paid a lot to be a middle six player. But if he can be a true top six forward, that if Holloway slumps, you can slot Booch back up. I'm getting ahead of myself here. The other one is, I guess you would say, Brandon Saad. You've seen some Joseph playing middle 6 minutes, recently Toropchenko, but I feel like Brandon Saad's the only other real. If there were justice in the world, it would be Nathan Walker, but unfortunately, that isn't the reality.
Yeah. When are they gonna? Sorry to cut you off. When are they gonna build the Nathan Walker statue? That's important to me. Like, when is that? When is that gonna happen?
You have no idea how good Nathan Walker is.
The Thunder from Down Under, baby.
That's good.
I can't take credit for that. I think I saw it somewhere, but I love it. The Thunder from Down Under.
But anyways, back to Brandon Saad. I really think it feels like Saad's time on this team is they're kind of just waiting for his value to be right to move off of him.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of stuff from Sam on X Twitter. Shout out if you've seen any of his posts recently from our most recent episode, or just following that. He does good stuff, but he's posted a lot about Brandon Saad's lack of effort at all entirely. And I think there was something along the lines of like the great forechecking scale to no forechecking scale. On one end is like, a good player. On the other end is Brandon Saad. So he is the bar right now, as in you can only go up from Brandon Saad's effort level. And that's just like so counterintuitive to what Jim Montgomery is trying to build here. So not only is he like a contract that would make sense to move on, not only is he a player that a contending team would look to acquire for a playoff push, he doesn't really fit what the Blues are trying to do anymore. And if he'll probably go somewhere and probably go back to being Brandon Saad, who's going to score between 15 and 25 goals every season. Mm-hmm. This season, stats check, he is at 16 goals in 40 games. Yeah, right on pace for about 20 goals once again. That's a valuable player to have, but he's really not meshing.
He's only got 7 goals, 16 points.
Sorry, 16 points. That's completely different. He is not on track at all. My apologies. Anyways, he'll probably go back to being that player. I don't think Brandon Saad is just cooked, although that could be the case. But he's really not meshing with the identity and effort and everything of this team. Yeah. But that's a player that Pavel Buchnevich has to beat out for those minutes. I think he can. But to answer your question, he should be able to. But to answer your question on how this lineup is going to shake out for Buch, he has to prove it.
Yeah. Brandon Saad, by the way, on pace for 14 goals. So someone who we were pretty comfortable saying like 20 plus, no matter where you put him. That has not been the case this season. So super disappointing. And yeah, it looks like an effort thing. It looks like a compete thing from Brandon Saad, which is super disappointing. And I hope they can move off from him. But like, which team is going to want to take him on unless you see something there? So
I bet they could move his contract.
Yeah,
crazier things have happened.
That's true. Not a bad contract. I just mean in terms of getting as good a return as you can, which at this point isn't a whole lot.
At this point, the package might not wow you, but it's the kind of deal that happens every year. Some team can certainly talk themselves into the pedigree and the potential. It does also kind of just feel like change of scenery would probably help him. So I bet they'll be able to move him. Now, whether that's in season or in the off season, I'm not sure. But it's so not working at this point. It's time to move on.
Yeah, coming in the chat, he's been on the bench a lot. He was a healthy scratch, like 2 games for like the 2 games before this Vegas game. I believe he's been a healthy scratch a total of 5 times so far this season. So, like not great production from Brandon Saad. Hope they can move on from him. Free up some cap space for the off season. Maybe go out and sign a free agent if you can move some of this salary off the books. Real quick, I want to get your thoughts on Robert Thomas here. So he's been someone that he's was like demoted to the second line, right? He's the 2C in this game against Vegas, and I believe he played alongside Saad and Neighbors in that one. Um, how much of like his lack of production, and again, it's lack of production for his expectations. Like he's still a productive player. He's still a good player. He's on pace for 25 goals and 80 points. So like he's still a good player and he's still producing. And it's crazy
80-point player, and we're like, yeah.
I think the concern comes from January, like this month of January. He went on a hot stretch in December. Um, that game against Utah, he looked rough, and I think there are not like any long term concerns there in terms of like was the contract a mistake, like nothing like that, but just in terms of this is a vital stretch of schedule right here that we're in. You need your best player to be your best player. How much of his sort of like disappointing production by his standards is, you know, his line mates that he's being utilized with? Like how much of it is, you know, for him, or how much of the blame falls on his shoulders, and how much of it falls on the shoulders of his line mates or the coaches for utilizing him with those players? Like if he was playing alongside a Holloway and a Kyrou, he might have better production. But yeah, what are your thoughts on sort of his deployment in that sense?
I really don't see it as a line mate issue, partially because I don't want to just write off good players struggling as it's other things going on. Again, I've just been burned as a Cardinals fan, but also I do think there's a little bit more to be not worried about, but just like he's cold, he's slumping. So we talked about, or you mentioned his torrid stretch in December. In December, Thomas had 19 points in 14 games. It's over point per game. He had a plus 13 plus minus, 6 penalty minutes, average time on ice 20 minutes, and then 20-41, so almost 21 minutes. And his shooting percentage was 21.4%. Now that is a totally unsustainable amount, but he was shooting a lot. And what we really said was the evolution for Saad was that he was starting to shoot the puck more and that he was starting to score more also. Mm-hmm. Now that now that Thomas is slumping, that what was his, if probably not the source, it can't just be one thing makes you good, because then why wouldn't you do that all the time? But in January, he's got 6 points in 9 games, nice, at a -5 rating, 17 minutes time on ice, so we've seen some of that demotion happening and such. And the other piece of this is that he's shooting a 10.3%, which is pretty poor. It's not awful, but you really want it to be more around at least 12 for like a good forward, and closer to 15 for someone with a good scoring ability like Thomas has shown this year. And it's just so strange because it feels like that confidence that he had is just entirely gone. And it doesn't really make sense as to why. Now, I do think certainly, while I say I don't want to entirely write off his play because of his line mates, I don't think his line mates are helping at all.
Yeah.
Certainly they are exacerbating a problem that is there. I think there's just more to it than just that. Mm-hmm. However, yeah, he's not the player that we've come to know throughout his career, and just it's tough. But I think he'll be back again. He is still scoring a point every 2 out of every 3 games in this quote unquote bad stretch. Like you said, he's on pace for almost point per game, and that might fall a little bit above or below depending on how well he can recover. I do also think Neighbors scoring a little bit more. It seems like he has a little bit more comfort playing with Neighbors, which mostly just seems to be get Neighbors rebound opportunities, which is sort of random, but yeah, it's been kind of working. I do think his other side just having sort of a black hole of like a spot like Brandon Saad has done nothing with Robert Thomas. Torpchenko has done very, very little. Matthew Joseph did nothing, and Buchnevich, really the loss of Buchnevich, I think, is hurting him here too. But yeah, it's tough to pinpoint one, but I would like to see him shoot the puck a little bit more, especially if his line mates are the problem. But I think the other thing is his defense hasn't really been exceptional either. And part of the reason the Holloway Shen Kyrie line has been so effective is they're so stalwart defensively.
Yeah.
Those are kind of our three best defensive forwards, maybe.
Yeah.
That like
Right
and
now.
Booch and Faxa, I guess. But Faxa is never going to play with Thomas because they're both centers, and Booch, like we said, just hasn't been as good defensively or offensively. So not having a defensive help for Thomas, honestly, I would say is more of his line mates are causing the problem, because offensively, I would expect Robert Thomas to be able to create when there isn't much to create. That's just the kind of player his caliber what you expect of a player his caliber.
Yeah.
But yeah, he could use some help defensively and get back to shooting the puck.
For sure. Yeah, in his defense, like if Buchnevich, he's played a lot with Buchnevich, at least earlier on he was. I think if Buchnevich was performing to his career standards, Thomas's numbers would look a little better too. And I think that line, if they were performing again to career standards, could be solid on both sides.
I think they would still be the first line if that was the case.
For sure. Yeah. So that definitely doesn't help. But like you said, he is the caliber of player that we expect to be able to overcome stuff like that and still sort of elevate the play of his line mates. So hopefully he can figure things out here a little bit. Not that he's like super slumping or anything, but I think moving him to 2C, it's understandable when you understand or when you think about how well the Holloway Shen Kyrie line has been performing. But I hope that it encourages Robert Thomas to it just like lights a fire under his rear end, and he's able to start, I don't know, just kick it into like a higher gear, because in December he was insane, and I think it's unfair to expect him to keep that pace up all season. But if he gets on another streak like that, that could really push the Blues, into a wild card spot potentially. So yeah, a lot of interesting things to think about with the lineup between this interesting roster shuffling and Broberg's potential injury if he misses time. As it stands today, the Blues are 1 point out of a wild card spot. They got 50 points, tied with the Vancouver Canucks. Calgary Flames have 51. The Blues have played 48 games. The Canucks have played 46, and the Calgary Flames have played 45. So both those teams have games in hand on the Blues. But they got to win those games if they want to, keep up their pace ahead of the Blues. So there's pressure on them too. So I'm really excited to see what the Blues can get done over this stretch. They just won an exciting one against Vegas, 5-4 shootout win. That was huge. They're going to play Vegas again tomorrow night at home. If you're in St. Louis, go to that game. Support the Blues. Important games here. Then they play Dallas, and then they play Vancouver. That's the one. The next one I'm most excited for is to see how they perform against this team that it's probably going to come down to the wire at the end of the season. Them and the Flames. I think these three teams, and maybe Utah is in that group a little bit, but really these three teams are these are the ones competing for that second wildcard spot, and it'll be an exciting race, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the Blues can get done over the next week or so. I'm hoping they just dig in. But we talked about last episode how frustrating it has been that they can't get a 3-game win streak together. And I think I mentioned how funny would it be if that came against Vegas, and Dallas. Well, they got the first one, so let's keep it up. Get the second one tomorrow. So, anything else you want to add on this lineup discussion, this Broberg discussion before we say farewell?
I am a little bit curious, actually, as to
Yeah,
your thoughts on the if Thomas can return to form in some aspect. What do you do with the top two centers?
yeah. If Thomas returns to form and we don't see any dip in production from the Holloway Shinkaru line, I think like keep playing that line as the top line because if they continue to be one of the most effective lines in the entire league, not just on the Blues, in the league, which is crazy. Crazy to think about how effective they are. Then I mean, I wouldn't want to mess with that chemistry, right? By sort of swapping those two centers. If they start to dip, I'd be interested to see what Robert Thomas could do with those two wingers. Um, but I wouldn't be super, you know, I wouldn't try to overdo it and force something that's not there to try and squeeze just a little bit more out. Um, if that top line continues to be as effective as they have been. Um, and also, if Thomas has a return to form, then I think that his line, despite having poorer line mates, I mean, we'll see that take a jump forward too. So I mean, having two effective forward lines in that regard would be um, really exactly what you need out of a team in the wild card hunt. So um, those are my thoughts. Do you have any extra thoughts on that?
I think Thomas adding to Halloween Kyra, which has been so good, is like so tantalizing.
Yeah,
It's really hard not to push that button, but I think it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if
yeah,
Shen can eat up the first line minutes, which I don't think he can. In that case, I would totally swap them out. But if this line continues to be one of the best in the NHL,
yeah.
you don't break that up.
Also, you got to think about if you swap them, then what is your second line? Saj, Shin, and Neighbors. I mean, that's not exactly exciting. Um, I think my philosophy is sharing the wealth a little bit, like splitting up that talent a little bit to try and elevate both lines. I think is more valuable than having like a mega successful one line. You know.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, if there is a dip, I'd be interested to see what Thomas could do. But I think seeing Shen with different wingers might be a tough pill to swallow. Um, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, I think that'll do it for us for this episode of Note News. If you haven't already, we would really appreciate if you would like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's the best way to help us out right now. We go live twice a week, talk all things blues, so you can check us out. Usually Sundays and Wednesdays is when we typically do it. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer to listen to audio. So we'd appreciate if you would follow there, leave a 5-star rating. That goes a long way for us. And if you want to stay up to date with what we've got coming up, upcoming episodes and streams that we announce, guest hosts that we'll have on, check out graphics and memes and videos and stuff. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. We post a lot of fun stuff over there. So check us out, give us a follow. We appreciate you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Let's go Blues, baby.
Let's go Blues.